Have you ever felt?
Are you listening? Damn. Yeah.
Oh, Eric, dude, thank you so much for coming on, man.
Absolutely.
I got a question for you.
Okay.
We recently met at the gym, right?
Yeah.
So what's your last name? I don't really
this
know
is
you.
great. So my last name is Luck.
Luck.
Yeah, and my wife's last name, guess.
I don't know.
Good.
Good? Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
So it's pretty interesting. We're
That
gonna
is pretty
hyphenate.
wild, man.
Yeah, the DMV got a kick out of that.
I'm sure they did, dude. I tried to schedule an event the other day there. It feels like a fucking event. Like I need to change my license over from another state, and I've been back here for over 2 years now.
Mm-hmm.
Like every time I do, an appointment with them, something else comes up.
Yeah.
But it's like, it's brutal. It's like, I need to just get a new license, and they're like, appointment only. I'm like, your fucking system sucks.
I mean, I don't know. It's funny how relative things are coming from like the DMV in downtown Manhattan.
Oh. Yeah.
Where you're like, we're leaving and you're like, did you hear that? They were like, have a great day.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like
totally
they
perspective.
spoke
Yeah.
to us,
Oh,
you
wow.
know. So yeah, the small town thing. It's been a change. I mean, it's funny to hear somebody complain about that. The La Plata County DMV. I was just driving out here, and I was thinking, I was like, God bless the La Plata County Electric Association and their linemen with like the weather and everything. Yeah, I was kind of mentally running the comparisons between them and like Con Ed, and I was just like, oh my God.
Yeah. So yeah, let's get into it, man. Because you guys we met the other day at the gym. We were both like, just flipping out, fighting the demons in the sauna, and I'm in there air drumming. Just
well, it's funny. You were technically accurate air drumming. Like that's why I thought you were actually a drummer, because I was like, oh, he's like moving his feet. He's like working the hi hat and the kick. Like I think this guy might actually be a drummer.
Just many years of wanting to even be able to play an instrument. I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. So yeah, we bumped into each other. You kind of asked me because I'm in there air drumming. You're like, hey, what's up? You play music?
For musicians,
and it's like that spark. Like no matter what kind of music, if somebody's like sees you and they're like, hey, do you play me? Are you in a band? It's like always like a kindred spirit of like, I do. And what's up, man? Like what's you instantly just like, and I could see everybody in the locker room. They're like, what the fuck are these guys talking about? We're like, so. But yeah, and then the second time I saw you, you let me know like you guys are from New York and like your whole thing here. So. Yeah, I mean,
it's been a crazy ride.
What brought you guys to Colorado?
So, my sister-in-law, my wife's sister, it was actually kind of a tragedy. She lost her husband in an avalanche.
Oh, Jesus!
In a skiing accident. Yeah, we kind of got a text message at 4 a.m. from my wife's mom. It's like her half sister is kind of a situation. Sorry, I'm gonna silence my phone. I just realized I forgot to do that.
So good.
Excuse me. Cool. But yeah, so, and we kind of went through the whole craziness of COVID in New York.
Fuck.
Like just, like neurotic cases all around you. And it was bizarre. We were lucky enough to go stay at my parents' house in Ohio for like the worst of it when, people were like rushing the grocery stores and the shelves were empty and all that. And then I had already wanted to get out of the city because I was sort of done with my career at that point, and I was moving on and getting into more stuff I was like, well, if I want to build motorcycles, maybe I should go out west, and I'm sick of the city anyways, and I like the mountains, and I was shooting for LA and stuff, and had actually already gone there, moved back, and this happened, and I was dating someone at the time. I've been single for almost 10 years, and we were kind of like, well, and she's like, well, you were thinking about getting out of the city, and I'm like, well, yeah, we kind of were. And we get this text 4 a.m. and it's like, oh, and so we just sort of up and decided because she had 2 twins. They had just had twins like 2 months before. I think the twins were born in October, and it was mid-December when the avalanche happened. So it was crazy. I mean, it's just the whole family. It's just gutted. It was a wild experience just to get that text, 4:30 in the morning from my wife's mom that he had passed away. So then, we sort of hit up her sister, and we were like, so we were kind of thinking about leaving the city, and you obviously you're probably going to need some help, and we'd love to come help you and meet the kids and help you raise the twins and stuff like that. And they'd sort of been not completely estranged, but my wife always regretted that their relationship had been more distant, as they gone older. So it just was one of those things where, I'm not always looking for what I want. I'm just looking for signs of like what should be. And we all sort of saw it. We saw the pieces come together. And I had never been to Durango. My wife had been 1 or 2 times. And we literally, by May we were packing up.
Oh wow!
Yeah, by May of that year, By May of that year, we were packing up and heading out west. 2 weeks in a U-Haul, us and the dog, and so here we are.
That's pretty crazy.
So then, so we really reconnected with her. I have this whole new aspect of my family now that I never imagined, because I lost my dad about, I want to say 6-7 years ago at this point, and he was sort of a major figure for my extended family. And so that sort of scattered to the winds between my traveling and my cousins and everybody having their kids and their families. And so it's been a really enriching experience to come and, see these little kids and see these little babies. And now it's 2 years later and they're walking around and they're talking to me and I'm Uncle Eric and they're, asking me to play them songs on the guitar and stuff. And it's been a wild, experience to come. And it's been like a lot more fulfilling than I was. Because I showed up with no expectations. So I can't say it's more fulfilling than I was expecting, but I could say it's more fulfilling than I imagined.
Sure. Yeah.
That's for sure. And then, I needed a place to work out. So, we ended up buying a house. And long story short, wound up in Ignacio there. And yeah. So
that's a wild. That's a wild story.
That's just a little chunk of the adventure, man. That's just a small chunk.
I know you and I have talked about this a couple of times at the gym, but just for kind of people to understand, maybe I guess what more, they give a little more context of what your lifestyle was like in New York, like because I kind of asked you and your wife the other day, what you guys do? And you sort of gave me, I think, the 2-minute version of that. But it's like, it sounds like you guys were both kind of like in the middle of this like kind of career that you both were doing separate things. But it was just, I can't imagine because I'm, I live here. I've been here since I was 12. Right. And it's like, I don't know the big city. I mean, I've lived in Denver, I've lived in Tempe, but that's not New York City. So what did you do back in New York?
I moved there in 2006. I pretty much went straight from college. I got a degree in photography. It was just something where it was like I was this little skate rat and I didn't know what I was going to do. And it was Midwest, nothing to do, kick around, don't want to go and do an office job, whatever, don't want to wash dishes for the rest of my life. And took a photography class in high school. And like, it was the first time anyone ever told me there was anything good I did. So just wound up doing that, got to college. Kept pursuing it. I'm like, well, how far can I take this? And I'm like, well, eventually I have to go to New York if I want to do the stuff I want to do, which what really drew me was in this world of, looking at senior portraits and all these, your typical high school photography class. And one of the photo labs in town had like the really cool underground magazines like Purple and Dutch and like all this stuff that went out of business during the big like print collapse, during the recession in like, it was kind of 2008. So it was like, I chased this thing right to New York City, and then as soon as I get there and I'm assisting and I'm meeting the people and all the magazines I want to shoot for, and it's like magazines aren't a thing anymore. No one shoots film anymore. Everything I had is an entire expertise, like film and publishing and print. That was what I wanted to do. Editorial fashion, editorial print fashion was like what I wanted to do. Within 2.5 years of being there and getting into the industry, that was like, shrank. It's not gone, but that market is like there's 50,000 people trying to do it and there's 2,000 jobs.
Yeah.
And so it was just, it just breeds this cutthroat mentality in you to just, and everyone's like that. So when you say like, oh, it's like everyone's kind of on this separate path, but then we all kind of know that this city is this crazy organism type mass of like chocolate and peanut butter that can never get unmixed. And we're just all bound by that.
Yeah.
And so whenever you meet someone, it's like you kind of have this thing in common. It's like kind of going overseas for, a tour of duty and then meeting some other guy who was in a different company, but, did the same thing. And you're all just kind of like that. And then you get these little microcosms of the industries, which gets even more kind of crazy. And that's when you get into that's basically why I started to get out of the industry. Because then it becomes about who you are, where you're from, who you're friends with,
Gotcha.
Like whose coke you're doing in what bathroom. And I'm just like, if no one wants to judge me on my pictures, like I'm out.
Yeah.
That's why I got into it. And she was also working in fashion, so it wasn't total opposite end, but she was just doing actual production. Whereas I was doing the advertising end, the marketing end, where it's like, so it was literal opposite ends of like, she would help the garment get made and I would help the garment get sewed. So in some ways, it was potentially could have been inevitable that we ran into each other in the first place. We'll never know. But what's crazy is like the whole reason we did meet was because I moved back from LA where I had gone to try and escape the photo career in the first place and fell into it again. So I moved back to like open a bar. And she was like a regular at the bar. And so that's actually, ironically, how we met. So it's like we didn't even meet through the industry, even though it was, at a certain level, it's a fairly small industry.
Sure.
And so, once you get into it, it's like people are going to start to know people. You're going to be 3, 4, 5 coincidences away. But that was the crazy part, was that I wasn't even doing the fashion thing. I wasn't doing the photography thing. I had left New York. I had been in LA for 4 years. Sort of fell into this cushy photo job there where I was just like, it wasn't traveling, wasn't challenging, doing the same thing every day. And my buddy just called me up and he was like, hey man, come open a bar with me. And I packed up all my stuff. And for like the, third time, I hauled my ass back across the country. And that's ironically enough how I met my wife, who was also working in the fashion industry. And she was kind of reaching a point in her career where she had like enough clout and enough, I mean, I don't say clout in like a bad way. Like she was, like she had a big head or anything. It was more just like people knew who she was because she'd been doing it for a long time. Yeah. And she had connections at certain factories that like relationships that she had built and cultivated and took 6, 7, 8 years to do. And that it was almost like when you hire her, when a company hires her to get their clothing produced, they're hiring her because of her experience, but also because she has a rapport with certain people, because it's New York City, it's characters. Some people are crazy. You call the wrong person on the wrong day and you say the wrong thing, like fuck off, and they hang up and good luck, getting them back on the phone with you. And so because she has all these rapports, she was starting to realize she was in a position where she didn't need to be located in the city. And because I was wanting to get out of photography, like the reason I wanted to get into fabricating and machining was because that's a skill I can take anywhere in the world. Yeah. Versus if I want to be a photographer or a digital tech somewhere else, I have to move to a big city. I have to go to Berlin. I have to go to London. I have to go to Tokyo. There's kind of certain industry focal points for that stuff. And so we're already exploring the idea. It was crazy how these seemingly totally random things all at the time just led up. I just trusted, what was happening. And because I was in such a place in my life where it was so transitional of, do I really want to do this? Do I really still want to be a photographer? I spent 14 years of my life like doing this and traveling the world and all these skills. And am I wasting it? But I'm learning new skills, but I hate the city, but my friends are here, and I didn't let myself try to get too like, but what does it all mean? And I have to make a decision and I have to get all these answers. Yeah. And through just like acting one step at a time and just acting and reacting, not reacting, but acting and watching what happens and reading reactions and looking at it as a conscious action, I wound up here. And I got to say, after everything I did and all the traveling and the people I met, and then, I'm probably the happiest I've ever been. That's at this point in my life.
There's a lot to be said about it.
I can't be
man.
more thankful. Yeah. Just to let go of, like, the biggest change was letting go of that goal of like, I'm going to be this big time fashion photographer. I want to have a $3 million apartment in Manhattan. I want to have all, and I realized like that was what was actually making me miserable. And I was making these excuses, and it was really, that was what was making me miserable, was that I was holding myself to these like unrealistic standards. And it wasn't that I was a bad photographer. It wasn't necessarily that, they wouldn't hire me because I wasn't cool enough. And it's like, sure, in certain circumstances, but I could, if I really wanted to do it, I can go out and, you know, if I wanted to work here, I could go out and I could get involved in outdoor photography. And I had to be honest with myself and be like, maybe this isn't really your passion. Maybe you just got into this because you were a crazy teenager and never had a compliment before, you know? Like maybe you just really have to be honest with yourself. Yeah. Maybe you really actually have to be that honest with yourself. And then, and honestly, once I did that and dropped like all that baggage of my personal expectation of what I thought where I should be at certain points and things like that, it's like everything changed. Everything changed. And like I just said, I mean, I'm the happiest I've ever been. And I feel like the more this happens, the more I live like this, the more I start to think like you should kind of always, if you're always, you know, every moment should be the happiest moment that you've ever been. Because if you really are involved and conscious in your environment, you're thankful and aware of all the things that brought you there and all the people that helped you get there, you know, because as much as it feels random and we're here on accident through, you know, our own actions and the happenstance of, you know, folly in the universe. But, you know, there were people in our lives and things that happened that challenged us and influenced us and did all these things and were there for us when we needed it and allowed us to help them so we could learn lessons through that to always bring you to that present moment. You're never divorced from all those things. Yeah,
there's definitely a huge shaping in that. You said something a second ago. It's like, you know, getting rid of, you know, you called it baggage, but it's like, it's almost like you are, and I've definitely done this so many times and I still do this. But I think anymore, like the older that I get, I become more aware of the situation of like, hey man, you're putting yourself right back into the same boat. It may be a different paint color, but it's like, you know that's what made you miserable. Yeah. So it's like, are you sure totally. You want to go that? And it usually takes me like a good drive or something to just be like, okay, you know, like, yeah, you could have all this baggage or these, you know, ideologies of what you think you should or shouldn't be. Like if that's in, you know, the lens, you know, of the way that your kids look at you or however, it's just like, you know, you can build all that up, but it's a huge weight to try and keep that if you know that the surrounding of getting to that is misery, especially if you've already experienced it. You know, so that's a good one, like getting rid of the baggage, because it's not necessarily always baggage. I think that it's almost like that was just an interesting way to say it. Like, you know, because I didn't feel like, you know, in past, like with my personal experiences, is like, it wasn't always baggage. It was, I think me mentally trying to tell myself that it was okay, like getting to that and going through the struggle. Like I was just, I would say like, it's just part of it. It's just, it's supposed to be that way. But it's like, I think your case is great because it's like, yeah, like you're supposed to live in misery and be unhappy to have that style of job, to be a high-end fashion photographer, to live in New York, but all of a sudden you get out here and that is not a possibility here. But because it's not a possibility, all of a sudden, like your entire world, your body, your being has opened up, and it's like, I'm actually fucking happy. You know what I mean? Yeah. And that's a weird way to kind of look at it, just at least in my head, like as baggage.
The reason I look at it as baggage is because eventually you got to drag it with you. You know, like, because it's an externally imposed viewpoint, right? It's like, we're shaped just as much as we have our personalities. We're all, you know, we're just shaped by how we grow up and what we're taught. And there's norms and there's all these things that are just like a system of rationality that wants to be imposed on something that really can't. And eventually I would hope to think for every person, we all have this shared common experience where like that breaks down inside of us and we know, and you kind of wake up a little bit to it and you have to, and that's the moment it becomes baggage. Right? Because that's when you like, oh, I'm dragging this thing with me. It's not mine. It actually like the first step to freedom is to realize it's not yours. It's not necessarily you, that it's like you have this thing inside of you that's malleable and flexible, and it's painful to change, and it's hard, and it's full of habits, and it's kind of a machine. But if you slow down and you realize that it's not necessarily that you're the problem, it's just your approach to the problem. Or, you know, your understanding of the problem, that it's actually rarely you're directly the problem, that there's like something wrong, you know, that like you're a bad person or something like that. It generally is more tends to come that there was something externally that triggered some response that makes that holds some resentment, and then the more that builds and the more that builds, the more you drag it with you, the heavier it gets, and then just it's baggage, man.
Yeah,
it's just baggage. It's just
for sure.
just gotta
That's that, man. I'm I obviously I don't know you. We've met a couple of times, but I'm glad to hear your story of like getting out here, because there's
I appreciate that
in a weird way. Like when I remember, I'll never forget. Like I moved here with my parents in 1998. I think I was 12 or 13 years old. It was like we did a very classic, ski trip in March. We were from northern Louisiana, and so we were here by the middle of May. And so it was like this cliche Southern family comes up. It's so fucking gorgeous.
Right.
So anyways, when I moved here, we moved to Bayfield, and I think at that time, like the class that I was in, maybe 50 people, maybe 60. Yeah. And dude, every ounce of my soul hated it, like because it was different. I had no friends. I had to start over. Yeah. But then it's like I got into it. I got into the class, and like life started happening, and the simplicity of like, I think maybe it's the life outside of a city. I won't say Colorado because it could be Ohio or Kansas, but like the simplicity sometimes that those areas that don't have all the amenities in the world bring. It's like you love to have all those amenities. It's fun. It's like, I wish we had this sometimes. But it's like, that is what allows this area to kind of stay, almost like free in a weird way.
Right.
So it's like with me, when I fully felt that and I hated it, but looking at it now, it is the absolute best thing, and I would never change it if I had to do it all over again. Yeah. I would wish upon myself that my parents would make that same exact move. Right. Because those people that I knew very well, like my best friends, I tried to keep up with them through the years, and it's like, it's different. It's like, it's like the city life. It's the vibe. Right. It doesn't hold as much weight. Like some of the people that I know here, like for the gentleman, the episode that aired this week, like that's my oldest friend in the area, and he's a total goofball. But I love him. Yeah. And he was the one person out of all my friends, like when we moved to Texas, horrible storm, like we're down there, he calls me, hey, we got this storm going on. Do you need me to go out and check on your mother and father-in-law? Yeah. You know what I mean? Yeah. It's that kind of, it allows you to be real across the table or across 5 states. It's like you, for some reason, it's like not everybody's not focused on the rat race and like getting to what the end results are. It's like there's a little bit more freedom. Yeah. And I like it's like almost like a longer wavelength. You know what I mean? It's like, it takes time. And it's just it allows you to do that. And I appreciate that more, especially now that I'm getting older and I'm aware of that. Like I would never, like we tried to live in Denver, like good, never again. Like, good luck. Never again. Dude. And so it just, for me, it's not for everybody. Some people like the city life, but for me, man, I really appreciate that I get the opportunity in this time frame of my life to be around here.
It's really
I think
cool.
that it makes it enjoyable. In a weird way.
Well, what's funny is I'm sitting here thinking, and I'm like, you're like, it's funny that you would call it baggage, and I'm sitting here feeling like, maybe you don't see it as baggage because you actually went through this wonderful process where you just opened up all the bags and started wearing, and we're like, what, there's a bunch of cool clothes in here, and just started like putting them on. You're like, check out these crazy outfits, and you're just like totally cool with it, and like that's such a wonderful approach because it's awesome, to see that you can make it work, and it's funny to hear you talk about this because I'm like, one of my best friends, he grew up in Montana in like small town, like 12 kids in his graduating high school class. And he wound up in New York, and he would not trade New York for the world. I mean, he grew up like mucking pigs and stuff, like real deal. They have, I think, 2,000 head of cattle on their ranch. I mean, big, acres and acres and acres. Family came over from, I think, Italy in the 1860s or something kind of thing. And he will never leave the city. Yeah. As the misery, as much as I hate it, as much as I've shown him and he's seen my misery and he is miserable in it, it's like he loves, it's just part of his personality, and it's part of the wearing the baggage thing that he just makes it part of the life, and he just can breathe this life into it. That it was like one of my biggest regrets about leaving the city was leaving the life that he could breathe into it. that I know that was part of my relationship. That became part of my relationship.
Are you
with
guys
it.
still close? Even though,
Oh yeah, I mean, he's my business partner. We opened this bar together.
Gotcha.
5 years ago. We're actually coming up. They just are posting the 5-year anniversary of this bar
nice.
for our party. I just saw the post on our Instagram.
Sweet. So you still own it? You're still?
I still have a share in it. Oh
cool.
yeah.
Nice.
I'm like a minority partner.
Cool.
I built it. I was like the sweat equity guy. I'm always just kind of like the scrappy, like no money, drive the shitty car and fix it himself. Like that's just kind of been, how it was, after I left home. And it was just like, that's who I was. So when it came down to it, and he's like, hey, there's this space and I did all the footwork and I can get us in. And he's like, I got X amount to, put in, and I have an investor and he's gonna, he's got a credit card with like a, 6-figure limit and he can just let us use it. And I'm like, great. And he's like, well, do you want to come open it with me? And I'm like, well, I don't really have much. And he's like, well, it's like, you know how to build stuff and do all this. And you've been doing a little bit of construction out in LA. And I was like, sure. And he's like, well, come on in and, we'll give you 10% if you help us build the place. And I just packed up everything and off I went.
Yeah.
Because I was like, well, I'll come back. And he was, like I said, it was like he was the guy who was the only person I trusted that was capable of breathing life into the city to make it enjoyable for me.
So I'm curious on, so the bar, like bar life in New York City versus like
crazy.
like photography life, right? Two different worlds, but
totally.
What did it share? Because I want to understand like the reason. I want to understand the context of like why it's baggage for you. But like, was the same baggage, or was it
no,
like,
not at all. I had a blast.
Okay,
I had fun because that was part of it. Was going through like the process where I was almost like, I'm worried if I'm gaslighting myself, and I'm like, well, is it the city? Is it me? Is it photography? And like, I was there for 10 years, I think, before I moved to go to LA and then come back. So, and I want to say 6 of those years were debating all of those things, all this crazy internal struggle, like ridiculous internal struggle. And it took that to get to the point where it was like, I had to have the confidence that I was like, this is actually the reason. And I'm being honest with myself that I actually kind of don't really want to be a photographer anymore. And I've just found other stuff that's more interesting. And oh, by the way, on top of that, the city's kind of an overpriced crap hole, way too hot in the summer. And I'm just tired of like everything about it. And I'm way happier when I go on location in LA. And I have friends in LA and I know I can land on my feet. So why don't I just, take the chance? Because otherwise I don't see anything else in New York, and that was getting me just to leave. That was like, that was like my thought process of, those 6 or 7 years just to get to leave, just to go to LA in the first place. And then to be there for 3 or 4 years and wind up in like doing, sort of a lesser version of what I was doing in New York, where it's e-com work and it's just a grid on a thing and it's not even creative work. And it's like, it's great money. I was making more money than I was in New York, but I was just crazy and bored and, kind of a lot of other stuff that I'd moved out there to basically build custom motorcycles and start my own shop. And I had spent, every spare moment I could in New York for the, a year or two before I moved out to LA, working for free in motorcycle shops and learning from people and just getting everything I could. And then I come out there and I kind of realized like I made the same mistake. It was like, if I thought New York City fashion photography scene was a bunch of like, oh, we're just all too cool club and no one else gets in. It's like, well, boy, was I surprised when I found out I was dealing with the exact same kind of culture shock when I was in LA and everybody's, chopper shows and this and that. And it's like, I'm still just nobody. I'm still just a kid from the Midwest. And I was kind of like, my one boss was yelling at me one day for being a grump on set. And he's like, kind of seems like for as much as you hated New York, you brought a lot of that negativity with you. And it just started to open my eyes. And I was like, well, shit, did I just have to relocate myself, 5,000 miles to realize that I'm the problem? I'm actually the problem. And that was another like cracking open moment where I was like, well, yeah, you know what? Well, if I'm the problem, then I guess I can probably be the solution.
Sure. Absolutely.
Yeah. And then it was just pure happenstance with the bar thing where back in the day when it was like, 06, 08, and just like little scrapping hustler schemers, me and Matt, my buddy. And there was this spot in Bushwick, and it was on a corner, and it was always cool, and it had this huge, crazy covered patio, and it was always dark. And always dark, always abandoned, always never, years and years, never a sign up, never anything. And it was just this thing, and it was always in the back of our minds that we're like, man, we really wish someone would just let us in there and like do something with it. We don't know what's in there. We don't know what it is. And then we forgot about it, live our lives, whatever. I moved to LA, life moves on. That was like 07, right? Mm-hmm. And now all of a sudden it's 2017. And Matt calls me and he's like, hey man, I got in the space. That was the first thing he said to me. And it had been probably 12 years before we'd ever even talked about this. And I knew immediately what he meant. And I was like, holy shit, no way. And he's like, I met someone, they knew someone, they got me the number of the realtor and they know the owners and I'm going in. And he goes in, he sends me videos, and it was just like, if it wasn't that space, I would have never done it. It was just another thing where it was like, I didn't know what was going to happen. I was just sitting in LA working this job, not like miserable, being pretty happy and pretty thankful for what I did, but just still feeling like something was missing. Like, well, this didn't kick off the way I wanted it to. I still don't have my own thing. I want my own. I want to be my, it was part of the thing with photography. It was like, I want to be my own photographer. I don't want to be sitting here running a computer for a guy getting paid $45,000 a day. I want to be the guy getting paid $45,000 a day. And once I knew that really wasn't going to happen and I didn't have the drive to put myself through the misery to earn that, I didn't know what was going to happen. And I was just kind of, for a while, I freaked out. But then I stopped freaking out and I just knew something would happen. And that was kind of this weird sign that because it was that space that I was like, see, like you trusted this and now you get this. And like, not only is it, if he's just calling you being like, hey man, you want to help me open this bar? It's like, hey man, we're getting in the space. That thing that we saw and like schemed and walked past every night, walking home at 4 a.m. going, oh man, I wish, and there it is. And it's like, well, shit, there's a sign if I ever had one. Yeah,
I was like, you can't look past that one. That's like, I don't know.
Yeah. So that was 2017. And so it helped me. It was something where it was like, well, it's another big decision, but I moved cross country before. So I'm not scared of that part. And I was actually kind of excited because I was like, I think this will finally be what severs me. I was like, this is the most remote thing. It's not an idea I came up with. So now it can't be that I'm the problem, so now what I can do is I can come to this and I can bring my best attitudes and my best efforts to this world that I have no experience in. And I can learn how to really not be the problem and learn how to be the asset and learn, about myself and what about it, what baggage I am bringing, what I need to, what clothes I got to take to the thrift store and what clothes I should wear so I can, dump the bags on the side of the road and leave them for the next, guy to worry about. It's a crazy experience. So that's kind of how that all happened too. It was just.
So during the time of the bar, or have you, cause we were talking the other day and you were kind of talking, at least, we didn't get into detail, but it definitely felt like you had a love wherever it came from for motorcycles, like old antique motorcycles. So where did that come about?
That's all fun. That was the first thing. Okay. So that's an even crazier story. So when I was 26, and I graduated college, I was diagnosed with Hodgkin's lymphoma. And so I had to do about a year of treatments. It was 8 months of chemo and four months of radiation therapy. So chemo really wipes you out. And I spent months on my ass on a couch watching American Chopper, just daydreaming about motorcycles. I don't know why, or it's just, I don't know if it's like the Ohio redneck, genes or like what it was like, but there was just something about watching them make the stuff and like watching them shape it, the steel and the machining. And there was just something that was so much more objective about that creative process because at the end of the day, it was a motorcycle, like it had to run. Like there was something one of my college professors, my design professors said where he gave out this really complex assignment and nobody in the class did it right. And he gave a whole speech where he was like, I really wish that if that if you did this wrong, it would like just catch on fire or something, so that you just knew you were doing it wrong, because there's no way to really, because you're just describing a set of like abstract color theory rules to someone and being like, okay, now make a painting with that. And you're kind of like, well, it's your first time and you don't understand color theory. And it's like, well, it's like learning 4 chords and then someone tells you how they go together and be like, okay, now write a song. Well, you're probably not going to really know how to put a 1-4-5 together until you actually sit down and hear a melody and go, oh, why does this sound like that, you know? And that sparked this thing where it's like, oh yeah, there's not this objectivity to this design stuff and the criteria and all this. And I like that. But then I didn't know it at the time when I started watching this stuff, and I was like, oh, I kind of find this relaxing, and I'm sitting on the couch because I can't walk. So it's just like hours and hours of cable TV. You know, I can't get out of bed. So I'm watching, and I picked up American Chopper for some reason. And I was just like, this is awesome. Like, if this is what he was talking about, if they don't do this right, it catches on fire. The bolt doesn't fit. The holes don't line up. Like, there's a whole different level of objectivity, and it just clicked with me somehow. And it wasn't like I was like, oh, I just want to throw everything away and be a fabricator. It was like, this is something I want to do at some point. And then once I ran out of the whole thing where I just got to the end of my rope with a photography career, it's like, well, I got to do, I just like got to do something. And that just sort of triggered back to that time where I was like, yeah, there was that, 8 months I spent lying on a couch daydreaming about building custom motorcycles. I was like, well, maybe I could do that, or maybe I could do tattooing. And I talked to one of my friends from art school, and she was married to like a world-class tattooer, throws, one of the biggest like tattoo conventions in the US. And she's like, yeah, but the problem is like, you got to tattoo every 400-pound hairy ass crack that walks in the shop. It's like, you get this, and it's like, and it turns out everything is like that. No matter what your dream career is, there's going to be something about it that just is awful, and it's like, you have to want it enough to push through that. And so that's sort of where I ended up deciding on the fabrication custom motorcycle thing over the tattooing thing as like what I was going to try as like my backup hobby kind of thing. It's like, okay, I'm going to keep making money with the photo stuff because I can, and I'm in the city, but I kind of got to make myself happy. So, and again, there it is, Matt to the rescue. I got a bug up my butt about getting a motorcycle, and for whatever reason, he had just got some big paycheck or cut some big check, or I forget exactly what, but he had a couple, $2,000-$3,000 in his bank account. So he said, hot damn, let's get on Craigslist. And there, and so we spent the next year and a half, like, because he grew up on a farm, so we already knew like how to weld and like rough fabrication skills. So we were able to like successfully chop the subframe of the bike, re-weld a good subframe, put new suspension on it, do all sorts of cool customizations to it, built it, had it running and registered, within a year. And I was like, well, that was fun. And all the meantime, I'm still working, and I'm still just driving myself crazy thinking, why am I not a photographer yet? Why am I not getting big day rates and, all these things? And just I don't even remember, for whatever reason, I emailed some random motorcycle shop because they did metric stuff. It wasn't like a Harley shop. It wasn't, it was just like they did old metric bikes. I love old Japanese stuff. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of, they did old Japanese and old British stuff. And that's, I just sort of got my foot in the door with them, and I worked for free. They sort of sent me in the back, and they had me sort bolts for 2 months.
Oh, Jesus.
They were like giant buckets full of rusty bolts, and there was the little pitch. Yeah, no, and it was this little thing, and it was like the thread pitch thing, and I had to sit there, and I'm like, okay, M6, 1.5. Quarter 20, and I did it for like, it was probably 2 months. And I remember I walked back out to the front, and I go to the manager, and I'm like, I'm done sorting the bolts. And he goes, oh, okay. Yeah. He's like, let me go get the owner to see what he wants you to do. And he gets the owner, and he comes back, and he goes, you're not supposed to finish. Yeah. That was like the first thing he says to me. He like didn't believe me, and he walks back there, and so he just found more bolts for me to sort.
Oh, jeez.
but I forget what they actually had me do, but there was something where like eventually there was that day, and it was a couple months later where one of the mechanics was sick, and it was just a simple part swap. I forget, I think it was like brake pads or something. Yeah. And they let me swap out the brake pads, and boom, I was on the clock, and I was a mechanic. You know, I didn't have a lift yet, but you know, I was on the clock and I was a mechanic, and I was like, that's progress. And it felt to me like the first time I got on a big photo job as an assistant in New York. And I was like, well, that's pretty cool. So let me see where that goes. Mm-hmm. And then I don't know, I just got that bug up my butt about going to LA I thought I had it. I was like, okay, a couple months here. And I was like, if I don't make a deadline, I'm never going to leave. And I maybe left that job a little early. I could have definitely, once I got to LA, I was like, ugh. Could have used a couple more years experience.
Sure.
You know, and it was what it was. But I mean, I had a great time out there too. And then that progressed actually further when I came back, because once I opened the bar, I was looking for just ways to make money. And I still wanted to get into the fabrication thing. So I hit up my old boss, the guy that gave me the chance. It was like, do this brake swap. And he was like, well, I'm not, you know, the shop was closed. It was gone. And he's like, I'm not doing that anymore. But I know a guy who's got some winter race bikes that he needs winter help on. So he sends me to him, and I meet the guy, and he knows me. And it turns out he was the owner, the guy that came out that was like, you're not supposed to finish. Mm-hmm. He was his old business partner. And so he had apparently seen me go through the whole and I had no idea this guy existed. And then he became this like amazing mentor for me. And I worked for him for about 2 years. And that was one of my biggest regrets about leaving New York City was having to leave that job, to work for someone like that, and like the way he cracked my mind open of just looking at the world through inadvertently showing me how to make things when you're in a situation where it's like just all these unknowns. It's like machining. Like you have to know where the part is if you're going to cut it. Mm-hmm. You know, you have to know how big the rough opening is, or you have to know how much the supports can hold if you're going to put in a giant, you know, staircase, a steel staircase in a giant condo.
Yeah.
You know, things like that. And just learning these other processes. And I've been able to take that, and it's been this cool thing of like taking that rationality and applying it to life. And takes my emotions out of and my ego out of everything. And it's been such a cool process to see how less I get angry about things, and how that just has become the focus now of like my big thing is just be like, just don't get angry. That's all you have to do anymore.
Yeah.
You know, like that's kind of, you can work yourself out of anything. Just don't get angry. As long as you don't get angry, then you'll be even better at working yourself out of it or through it or over it, you know, or whatever it is you're trying to accomplish. Because at the end of the day, point A's got to get to point B no matter what, even if you just want to eat, you know, it was just anything. So it's been a wild ride.
Did you work in that job up until you guys left to come out here to live with your sister-in-law?
Yeah. I was working for him straight through. I mean, he's one of the few people I've worked for that I'm like, I would throw myself into battle with him. You know, he's one of those people. And what was crazy is he's younger than me.
Yeah.
And, you know, he grew up like between Kazakhstan, I think mostly in Kazakhstan, and there were parts of Russia where he had to go live with his grandparents during the fall of the Soviet Union, during the fall of the Soviet Union, I think. So he had a whole crazy story. And his dad, he grew up around manufacturing, and he told me stories about running around Russia and stealing the little, I forget the mineral that they soak in kerosene to make acetone and acetylene gas. But there's like I don't think it's calcium or what it is, but there's this mineral, and it's like a soft rock mineral, and you soak it in kerosene, and the off-gassing creates acetylene gas for torch work, oxyacetylene work. And he tells me these stories about going around to the Russian construction sites as a kid and like stealing the calcium out of the acetylene generators and going home and putting them in water and blowing them up and stuff like that. So he grew up doing that, and he grew up, you know, with his dad doing this manufacturing business when they came to the States. So he understood things like volume manufacturing at this crazy, I must have been a crazy young age, like in his, you know, 20s and stuff. Mm-hmm. And just brilliant guy, like more or less taught himself everything that he does. And we would make all just beautiful furniture and stuff for like offices and condos. And it was a lot of brass work.
Oh, cool.
And it's like, it's hard to work with, and it moves, and it's a lot more sensitive to heat. So it just takes all this patience. And he just would, you know, just to have him come down and teach me these things, and all just the patience I learned, and had respect for his patience of what he had to do to get there. And then the fact that he could sit down and just walk me as someone who more or less in his world knew nothing, that like little bits of it, but really just, never held a TIG torch in my life.
Yeah.
And then, it's 6-8 months later and he's got me making brass welds, and there it is. And it's like, I'm on the clock. It was kind of like that moment. It's funny because that's actually how I became on the clock at his shop, was very similar to how I became on the clock at the mechanic shop, except the actual on the clock guy was there working for free for a couple months, and the actual on the clock guy just started mouthing off and got all grumpy, and he just fired him on the spot and walked over to me from the other side of the shop, and he was like, "Hey man, so I can probably start paying you if you want to work.
I need this to happen."
So it was same kind of thing where it was like I just put myself in that situation, and I was stressing myself out because I was like, "Oh, am I good enough? Does this guy like me? Is he gonna, am I gonna make money? I got to do all these things." But then like it actually worked, and that had never really happened because like the bar wasn't making any money. I was just coming off of being like, well, I tried to get out of the photo industry, but that didn't really work. And I tried to be a success in the photo industry, but that didn't really work. But then if I actually look back and I change my perspective, I'm like, well, I was a success in that, so it doesn't really matter. But it just felt good to like feel like something worked in the sense
especially
of
something that you're passionate about,
right? That it was like a felt like a deeper passion, more so like I'm more inspired to sort of create and put these things out because especially if I can have a more objective guideline, because if I'm making something for myself, it's like, I don't care if you don't like it. I just made a thing. Like if you like it, cool. If not, don't enjoy it. I don't care. But when you've got a print and you got a drawing and you've got a thing, and at the end, it's like really, really cool patina steel and brass welded, window displays for a playhouse in Manhattan.
Yeah.
Like there's something a lot more satisfying to that.
It's so much more tangible.
Totally.
I mean, not that the photo isn't, it lives forever, right? But it's like, you can actually grab it.
Not
with
editorial
your hands,
fashion.
you know what I mean?
Right.
Like there's something, you could smell it. You can, it has this like texture about the whole process from ground up. It
just reminded me when people say like, oh, well, why did you get out of photography? And I'm like, well, 'cause you can't put a photograph between your legs and ride at 100 miles down the road, ride 100 miles an hour down the road, like ultimately, like my legacy, I look at it and you're like, well, if you're, if I really keep doing this and like as an editorialist, it's like your legacy kind of just becomes like a stack of paper. And I was like, well, maybe I have more than that to contribute to the world. Maybe that's one of the reasons I'm, that popped into my head that I'm like, man, that's one of the reasons you're struggling is because you want to contribute more than a pile of paper. Because I knew I'm not going to be an Irving Penn. I'm not going to be a James Knockway. I'm not going to go and uncover some, crisis in the Congo and bring that stuff to the people. Like, I don't have the understanding of how, to make a world change or do something that I feel is going to make an impact with the photography. And maybe that was part of the struggle too. And like you said, you see this tangibility. It's like somebody walks away with this thing that it's like, there's stuff in New York that I'll probably go back in 10 years and it's still going to be there.
Yeah.
How
do you weld brass?
So
is it like within like argon? It's
just argon gas. You just use a TIG. You don't even have to change the settings. You just use a TIG torch. You can just blue electrode. And it's just all about the filler rod. How deep do you want me to go? Because I can get into. I
was just curious. I can get
into color matching with low fuming brass and the difference between silicon bronze and the penetration and the tensile strength, if you want. The tensile strength of the alloys.
No, I just was curious. My dad, like oddly enough, he had a mechanic shop for years growing up, and so he's a huge motorcycle buff. But
nice.
Was making frames and doing stuff, and so
cool. So he was definitely TIG welding.
Yeah, absolutely.
Making frames is not easy.
But I wasn't sure, like if it was something that you had to do differently.
No, same process. Yeah, that was that was a cool thing, was to have all that demystified of like titanium, all these things. It's like it's actually all just kind of the same. It's just about how much heat and where it's going.
Gotcha.
And you just have to have a parent. Your filler has to match. The more your parent will match your filler, the better joint also as well.
Yeah. No, that makes absolute sense.
And that's first principles. It's like once you understand just the first principles of it, it's cool to find out how much it really applies across the board. Yeah.
That's pretty wild. So how the hell did you get into this I don't want to spoil it or whatever. Are we good to go to talk about the your prototype that you're working on, or is that?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't care. I was actually a little. I was feeling I was jumping the gun because I wanted to show up with like my social media and website and everything to give shout outs and stuff, but I'm not, unfortunately, that prepared with it. But yeah, so excuse me. That roundabout came from another, attempt to escape the, system of working for other people, of just being an employee kind of thing, where so I'm out here and I wind up in a manufacturing machine shop. Really cool shop, like literally full of like millions of dollars of machines that you're not going to find around here. Really knowledgeable people. And I'm sitting there and I'm popping parts in and out of a 3-axis mill. And I'm kind of like, oh man, like this is not, 500 parts a day, 40 hours a week. I'm kind of like, this is kind of compared to what I was doing in New York. This is kind of the same situation where I was doing the freelance cool stuff. And now I'm here in an office gig doing the cookie cutter things. Like, is it you? And so I just racking my brain and just kind of getting miserable again, and was getting worried that I was like, maybe it really is me, because now I'm in Durango and I just fulfilled a dream of leaving the city again. And here I am kind of stuck in this like cushy but misery inducing job again. And I just one day, and I was like, because I wanted to do my own production of motorcycle parts for like, I don't know how much you know about like Yamaha XS650s and like old Honda CB750s, like all that kind of stuff. Yep. Like, I just really love that stuff. I think they're neat and they're fun. They're kind of, you don't see them, especially out here. You like never see them. But then, and I was like, well, if I can develop a part, that I can sell and I can make money off of that. And then I really started to understand what marketing research was and what market share was and sell through. And, and some of that I actually learned from my wife, because she has to deal with that end on clothing supplier stuff. And I was like, well, I guess the market for vintage, obscure Japanese niche custom street pro race parts is gonna be pretty small. So if I'm got a part and I'm selling it for $20, I'm going to have to move a lot of them if I'm going to pay off the house and, the CNC machine I have to buy to do it. So I just was like, well, screw it. Who says it's got to be motorcycles? That's cool that, you like motorcycles, and that's cool that you like these vintage, and I hear Matt in my head going, like when we were trying to open the bar and I told him my vision, he goes, the point is not to make a bar that you like. The point is to make a bar that other people want to come to. And I hear that echoing in the back of my head. So I'm like, well, what does everybody around here do? Yeah. And I'm like, mountain biking. And I'm like, cool. And so on top of that, once that popped into my head, then this was another kind of random coincidence thing, right place, right time. So there's this, like, the technology of 3D printing has been evolving, and it's been evolving. It kind of reached a point where it's like stopped in terms of, because of the strength, because of the types of materials you can use, and because of the strengths available. Excuse me, things like polycarbonate and ABS, and you could kind of put fiberglass shards in them and things, and you could get a reasonable amount of strength out of them. And so then this one company figured out how to put carbon fiber in nylon. And so it's like shredded up little pieces of carbon fiber. And that's how it started. And it wasn't very strong, but it was something that I had found when I was working back in the shop in New York before we had moved out here. And it was just one of those things in the back of my mind that I was like, that's cool that this machine exists. Mm-hmm. Where I was like, I know this technology is not there, but I'm really glad I know that this machine exists. And so it was literally like a day or two after I kind of had that get over the hump of like, well, why are you so married to motorcycle parts, in the first place? So maybe you should think about mountain bike parts. And then like 2 days later, I see an ad from the manufacturers, the developers of these machines, and they're like, we can do full strand carbon fiber reinforcement. And I was like, oh. These are
the same guys that had the machine in New York? Same company?
No. This is a machine manufacturer out of Boston called Forged. No, this is a wholly separate. No. My boss was actually back in New York at that shop. He wasn't like when I first approached him about the 3D printing thing, being like, check this out, this carbon fiber, he was the one who was like, yeah, but it's not like real carbon fiber. It's not. He explained to me the whole concept of like it needs to be full strand, and when you have the shards, it's like they can still pull apart.
Gotcha.
But when you actually have a continuous thread that's then embedded in that, which is what they developed years later, then you wind up with a product that actually has comparable tensile strength to 6061 aluminum. And so I was like, oh, well, now we're talking. So that began about a 1.5 year long process of working with salesmen. I mean, because they're not cheap machines. Working with salesmen, writing a business plan, talking with the SBDC, meeting potential investors, shopping my idea to every avenue I could, stuff like that, and. So it was about a 1.5 years of like development, and it's still all under, prototype phasing. And I actually just was able within the last, 4 months, to actually secure an investor for the machine, and have secured the purpose, and I'm in branding and actual prototype and physical testing now.
Nice.
So once I have, I need to have, because it's mountain bike parts and stuff, I want to have a certain amount of physical testing done.
Sure.
The simulations and everything look good, but it's like, they can't be downhill parts. Obviously, you can't, do a 15-foot drop on that, but it's like, you kind of need special, I sort of was like, well, you kind of need like special downhill gear to, downhill gear to like take that abuse anyway. So that I'm hoping people aren't going to expect to get that type of durability out of it. But in terms of just like, race use and stuff like that, the 30% lighter, it's comparable to 6061 T6 aluminum. And once I just personally, I've seen the data sheets, and once I personally have been and put the thing on the bike and ridden it, it's going to be time to really sort of reveal more details about that.
Sure. Can you tell us what part it is on the bike?
Yeah, it's a stem.
Okay.
I'm working.
Cool.
Yeah, the first part is a stem. I have my current design. It's under simulation. It's holding about 900 pounds, and it weighs 2.5 ounces.
Wow, that's pretty cool.
Yeah,
Oh.
I've put it into the hands of a couple local people, like a parts rep for the Four Corners, and
cool.
he was almost just like, well, he was like, how many can I buy? And I'm like, hold on, dude, I got to do some liability. I got to like secure some stuff with the liability.
Sure.
And I'll let you know when I got like 50 of them.
That's pretty crazy.
So that's been like the latest evolution of the adventure.
So are you going to begin your own 3D printer just for
I have it.
Oh, you do?
I have it. It's set up and
okay.
running and cranking out. And I'm actually talking with one of the guys at San Juan Vans. They do custom vans, and he was telling me that they need rocker switch panel covers.
Oh.
So that's another avenue. So that's what's so cool about the technology is it's so malleable. That you can really, do anything. Like I'm actually talking to people, my buddies out in LA that are directors of photography and stuff about doing cheese plates and, what they call the video mount stuff and all that, like hoods and all sorts of stuff, because same thing. It's like, a cheese plate, little aluminum thing with a bunch of holes drilled in it. And when you look at your actual production time of drilling, tapping, and all that kind of stuff, you're sort of winding up with the same amount of hassle. And I'm able to just sort of CAD something up and print it out, and it's 30-40% lighter, and it's done that day, and there's no tooling and there's no setup. It's just there's no CAM programming. That's one thing a lot of people I think don't realize with CNC machining is that you have to tell that machine where to go everywhere.
Yeah,
it's really crazy. It takes hours and hours and hours, and like it's setup time, and it's when you're prototyping and stuff, that's thousands of dollars to just get one out of the machine.
Yeah.
And then you look at it and you go, okay, now we got to do like 50 more revisions and iterate, and then you're still spending money before you get anything that's.
So are you versed enough, like with the CNC machine or the engineering side, to do all that yourself at this point? You are? Okay.
I was doing that. I learned how to do that at Alex's shop, the place back in Brooklyn. He had a rudimentary CNC that he sort of showed me the ropes on. He had a 3-axis mill and a lathe. Little Tormox, and he sort of showed me the ropes on those, and then I took it upon myself to take a week-long class that was actually back out in Ohio, and just did that and really like hammered in on it, because that was just, once I realized that was a thing, I was like, this is cool. Like a computer, you tell a computer and you watch it and it makes all these noises. I'm like, this is amazing.
What the hell's it doing?
Yeah. I want to know all about how and why and how this works. And then it's just the most craziest complex thing of, you have to tell it how, the tool comes down, it makes a pass, and then you got to tell it, it's called your step over, and you say, how far do you want to go the next one? And how big you make your step over changes how deep of a cut you make in the metal, and you have to run it past it at a certain speed, because if you go too fast, it doesn't clear the chips away, but you can change the angle of the flutes based on the tooling you buy to clear the chips away faster. And just millions of variables.
Wow, that's pretty crazy.
Infinite variables, and it's like such a wild rabbit hole. And so I wanted to just like soak up, because I was like, well, I have to know it. I just got in this like obsessive mindset where it's like, well, I have to know how to do it all. I have to produce the part and I have to do it. And if I can do it all myself, it's the cheapest way to do it. And the margins are already me so tight, and I'm already me selling so few things because it's such a niche product. And so I just had to like, soak all that up, and I just, kind of ran away with it for as long as I could until I, realized that like, it's just, I got burned out on it, I guess. I think that's what happened at the shop here. I just got burned out on the CNC thing, and then it's like, it really is a diehard thing. Like there's people that are.
That's what they do.
That's what they do. It's like, it's not even it's what they do, it's who they are. Like the people who worked at my shop, it was different to see of like who Alex was as a fabricator. And these guys, it's like, they're machinists, and and even that, where it sounds like they would be something similar. It's like, even just in the approach of a production machinist and a prototype machinist, those guys are going to be from different planets, practically going to be from different planets. They'll argue over what an optimal depth of cut is, because one guy's coming from the point that he wants to take as much raw material away as possible, as quick as possible, get to his finished cut to get that part out of the machine. And the other guy is like, well, no, you just want to sneak up on it to get the most precise cut as possible, because you're only making 4 and they got to be perfect because it's for the Berkeley Science Lab, And it's like, and both of those guys are machinists. So
to be a fly on the wall in that conversation would be like, pulling my fucking hair out.
Oh man, there was one time, so we made a lot of lamps and stuff, like lighting fixtures for bars.
Oh, cool.
That was a big thing. We had a big client that would always come to us and their designers and stuff, and they'd come in with their designers and everything. And there was this one time in the drawing, there's a chamfer, and the chamfer was like 4 mil or 5, and it's just like a standard call out, like 5 mil. And
what's a chamfer?
Oh, sorry. A chamfer is, so when you have like a corner, you have a hard edge corner like this, you just cut like a 45-degree angle.
Okay, gotcha.
It's also, you can call it like an edge break. Back in the day, you'd take a file and you'd put an edge break on it, just so you don't wind up with like a burr. You just, it gives, helps with the finish, the finish of the quality of the piece. So it's like, this little lamp collar, and it's this thing like this big, and it's got a 5 millimeter chamfer on it. And the designer's like, and it's going on something that's literally 12 feet in the air.
Yeah.
And the designer's like, well, what do you think about an 8 millimeter chamfer? And he's like, well, here's the best part. This is what I love about the guy. This is like the way I learned to deal with people and all these things, nitpicking, and just the grace this man had was and I'm still to this day in awe of it. So I think he like machined another one where it was different, and he showed him both, and he goes, okay, cool. He's like, do you see the difference? And then he walks to the other side of the shop and he goes, how about now? Yeah. And then he comes back and he tells them how much more it's going to be to do the extra reworks. And they're like, yeah, 5 millimeters is fine. And it's like, what a cool way to just totally avoid an argument.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like,
oh my God.
Like, and that was the lesson I took away from that. It was like, if you just kind of show people their own stupidity, a lot of times they're too embarrassed to like keep carrying on with it.
Dude, oddly enough, so before having become a real estate agent, I owned an electrical company, and I shut that one down.
Interesting.
But my brother and I kept going under a different electrical company that we owned together. And so as much as my wife is an interior designer, cool. But I've had so many problems sometimes with other interior designers because that same situation of like, oh, well, could you move it 6 inches? Like, all right. That reminded me of this, there was a chandelier that was in all reality, probably a third as wide as this was the base, and it was supposed to look like a gigantic waterfall with lights. It had one big metal base and a 1/4-inch plate, right? So everything had to lie in there.
Yeah.
So we built it on the ground. We set up 4 stories of scaffolding, because it's a 3-story building.
Yeah.
And there's one gigantic, so
it runs that whole length.
well, so we thought. Right? We're looking at the schematic, going, okay, well, yeah, all right, cool. And there's obviously 3 different call numbers, and you can get bronze 8 feet, 16 feet, whatever.
Right,
so I didn't order it. The designer ordered it. The client paid for it. We set up scaffolding.
Gotcha.
We built the base on the top deck. We carefully, because they're not globes, like you can't. If you break it, it's broken.
Yeah,
there's no replacing it. The actual wires run into it.
Right.
And so we have to hoist these up like as delicately as we can. There's probably 45 lights coming off this thing.
Yeah.
So we build it. It's brutal. I mean, we finally get it up and it's bolted to the ceiling. We slowly break down 4 levels of scaffolding, put it off the side.
No.
Client walks in. Designer walks in like, whoa, that's way too short. What did you guys do? And I was like, we didn't do anything. You ordered this shit. What are you talking about? And the client, the owner,
Oh my God.
and I don't know how much this thing probably, it might have been like 40 grand.
Right.
Gigantic.
Yeah, for sure.
And so she's beside herself, angry at us. And I'm just like having to just let it bounce, be that fucking, punching bag for a second. Yeah. And I finally get to walks down the hall with the designer. I'm like, what do you want to do?
Right.
And she's like, well, I can rush order the longer ones. I'm like, oh God. I was like, do you realize it took us 12 hours to install this gigantic?
Yeah.
And so she's like, well, we got to do what we got to do. So anyways, 10 days later, we do the same exact process again. Oh, dude, it was so brutal. All because it was a minuscule, design selection. And probably she didn't think about it. You have a 40-foot ceiling.
That's
8 feet down versus 12 feet down.
Yeah.
And all of the lights were offset.
Yeah.
So the thing of it is you could only really tell with the shortest and the difference, but we hung up the longer one by 3.5 feet longer every run.
Right.
And it was like, that looks no fucking different.
Right.
But she was dead set on coming in and being like, that's way shorter.
Yeah.
Way shorter than the picture. And I'm like, it's a 3x3
it's like, how do you
picture.
know? Yeah. It's like, what is that scaled to?
Yeah.
Like, come on.
Oh, that was, I'll never forget. Same thing with my brother. That was one of the worst ones we did. So it was good though.
To take it back to the baggage thing real quick, something else I've come to learn is expectations can create lots of baggage.
Your own
quickly.
Expectations or other people's expectations of you?
Either. Any expectations. Because if you look at that situation, you're like, their expectations, they had built something in their head from that photo without even thinking that that's impossible to do in the first place, accurately. And then they're like, why is this model that was completely impossible to inaccurately model so wrong?
Yeah.
And it's like, and then you can get hung up. There's that's what I mean, where that's where it becomes a baggage. Is you can get hung up on that because you want to force some model into your idea that's expectations. Or, you could open up the suitcase and just see what's in there and try stuff on and see what fits.
Yeah, exactly.
Just, something will fit, right?
Yeah. Man, what a fucking crazy time.
Yeah.
So what's the situation like? Did you start kind of working out when you guys got out here? Or has it always kind of been a part of your life, like post-cancer?
No. Well, that was where it came from. That was a big thing with the workout. But it was actually crazy because I was an obsessive cyclist before that. So it was something, it was like kind of my hobby in college was working on road bicycles and getting into road racing. So I was riding the day I got diagnosed. I was on a regimen of riding anywhere between 4 and 6.5 hours a day on the bicycle. Because I would it was the summer, small town in Ohio, small college town in Ohio, not much to do. So I'd go put 2-3 hours in at the bike shop, and then I'd have the rest of the day for myself. And so I would, if I had to work from 3 to 6, and I'm like closing, I got a long shift.
Yeah.
I'm like, great. I wake up at 7 in the morning and I'd be out on the bike. And I probably weighed about 160 pounds, 155 pounds. And then the chemo thing and all that happened, and it screwed up my metabolism. And I actually gained a bunch of weight at the end of that. The doctors were really confounded at the end. They're like, you're the only patient we've had come through here that weighs more now.
What does it say with chemo, like putting on weight? That's kind of wild.
Yeah, it was weird. Well, I think it was like, it put me into this like stress-induced binge eating cycle.
Oh, yeah.
Because I wouldn't eat for days. And then all of a sudden I'm starving, and it becomes like an associative thing of recovery. And then I start to like it. Right. And so I wouldn't eat for 3 or 4 days. And then it's like, I can eat. So I'm like, great, I got to eat. And my body's like, you got to eat, and I'll sit down and I'd eat like a whole pizza, just in one sitting. I'd make myself sick doing it. And it just became this, it took me forever to figure out, but it became this comfort cycle then, that it was like, once I got through that, it became the new way of dealing with stress in my life. That it was like, instead, I'd come home and I'd be like, oh man, rough day on set today. Oh, instead of being like, oh, I need a beer, it's like, boy, I can't wait to order a medium pizza and breadsticks from Domino's and a 2-liter root beer, and then the whole thing is gone in an hour, And so, yeah. And so then I started, one of the photographers I worked for, he was one of there were a few I worked for that were genuinely really good people, like total hearts of gold. They're not all, rich kids from Europe just running around because, with their parents' money. It's not all that. There are some really genuinely good people. And he had been doing mixed martial arts like pretty much his whole life growing up, judo, jiu-jitsu, Muay Thai, stuff like that. And he found a new gym, and he hadn't trained in a while, and he was, wanting to get healthy and stuff again. And I hadn't been riding, because you can't ride like you ride in Ohio. In New York, and I'd kind of fallen into this. I'd been single for a while, and I'd stopped cooking for myself because I was kind of getting over that, and I was living with this like union construction worker who was just ordering hamburgers takeout every day, and it's like I just sort of gave up and let his habits, kind of consume me. And I said, screw it, and I went to a class, and it was amazing. And so I spent a couple years doing that, MMA, Muay Thai, jiu-jitsu, grappling, all that kind of stuff in this like awesome gym where, guys like Ricardo Almeida would come in and give seminars. So it was just one of those things where, as much as I hate the city, there's certain little things that I took away from it that I know I can't get any. I could have never gone anywhere else, and I'm just super grateful for. So that got me back on it. And I did that really diehard for several years, and then I moved out to LA, and it was too expensive. It was like
the gyms were too expensive.
Oh, the MMA gyms. It's I went from, even in New York, it's which I was actually surprised how much that the gym out here was actually comparable, but that was years ago when I was training. So, but it was about, I think it was like $260 a month, and I was scraping that. I was scraping to get that together. Like the coach would have to take me aside and be like, hey, your payment bounce, your debit card got bounced this month. Just so you know, you can train this week, but if you don't give me your money in another week or two, you'd be cleaning the mats. And he was cool about it too. Another, I feel so blessed to have all these like wonderfully patient and tolerant people in my life of all my craziness. But yeah, so that was great. So that got me back on just the mentality of like forcing me to do something I didn't want to do, like putting yourself through a challenge, because everything, it's like you get, life wears you out, and you kind of just, there's that little thing of you just give up a little bit by day, and all of a sudden, that's how a lot of people find themselves in, positions where they're miserable. Yeah. And I've seen it happen to a lot of people I know and love dearly, and some of them have been able to get themselves out, and some of them haven't, and that's just kind of the way of it, I guess. But so for me, and then I moved to LA and got really fat because it was so expensive. I got really fat, like 215 pounds.
15 or
215.
Oh, okay.
So like for someone who was,
what do you weigh now?
I'm like 188.
Okay.
And when I was really working out hard, and really not eating, like that's still something I'm struggling with, is just the overeating. Like my wife's an amazing cook, and she'll, I'll sit down and I'm like, I want 3 helpings, but I can't. Yeah. But I know you love to watch me eat and enjoy, because I love it so much, and you're really good at this. And so that's been like the new challenge lately. But yeah, I was at like I think the actual heaviest I ever got was like 225. And that was when I had moved here. So I went to LA, I got really, really fat, moved to New York, couldn't afford to get back into the MMA thing when I was doing the bar. luckily the fabrication thing kept me like kind of leaned me up and built me some muscle because I'm throwing big, heavy, 100 pounds of steel, 100-pound pieces of steel around. So that kind of like whipped me into shape. And then I moved out here and, growing up, my dad belonged to like a health club and I always thought it was really cool, like the pool and the sauna and all that kind of stuff and the weight room. And I was just like, oh, that's kind of cool. It's like, it's not a gym. It's not like a 24-hour fitness, where it's just like a bunch of plastic machinery and stuff. It's like, it's a health club.
Yeah.
It's nice. It's cool. So I started out because we were living, when we first got here, before we got the house, we were living in her sister's house. So I was going down to the sports club in Durango, and that's where I signed up because I called them up one day. I was just like, "How much is a membership?" And they're like, $50 a month. I'm like, $50? Yeah. Like, you kidding me?
Let's go.
Yeah. And that's when I really took to it, and I got a session with a personal trainer. And I told her all about my past history, and I told her, I still want to keep. I want to get back into training. I want to start going and checking out the guys. I think it's called Elevated or something is the gym here in town. I don't know anything about it. But I would like to eventually, have the time to get back into that. But I was like, in the meantime, I got to get myself there.
Sure.
So that's why I got the trainer, and she came up with this awesome program for me that it's like I'm still using. Like, she came up with this crazy program, and it's like 5 days of these different insane exercises, and I've been doing it for a year and a half now, and I still haven't even needed to get past the third day of the whole program she put forward for me. I mean, it was like some of the best money I've ever spent in my life. Like, I got years and years of value and use out of the workout program that she gave me.
That's awesome, man.
Yeah.
I've never worked out with a personal trainer, or never had a personal trainer before, but
I never did until that point.
Yeah. I mean, some people they swear by it. They're like, it's almost like this accountability measure for a lot of people. And I mean, wasn't
so much what it was for me. It was just having the direction. Cause I only did like 1 or 2 sessions.
Gotcha.
Like the first session I met and we did a consultation. And I was like, I have this chronic pain in my shoulder from when I got hit by a car and from some jiu-jitsu injuries, and I got this and I got that. And she's like, okay, cool. And she's like, what do you want to do? And I told her I want to keep my mobility, and I still want to be able to train and be kickboxing when I'm 70 years old. And I hate weightlifting.
Yeah.
So she put this, so then the next time we met, she put this whole insane plyometric schedule together where it's like Mondays is kettlebell stuff and Tuesdays it's like muscle, I don't know what they call that, like resistance exercise where you're just like
training.
Jump resistance training. Yeah. And then another day it's like all these crazy cardio exercises. And then another day it's like 3 hours of stretching and all this stuff to like heal and it actually did. I had chronic pain in my shoulder for 7 years from, getting double stamped on getting hit by a car twice in the same spot, like rolling over onto that shoulder from my bicycle. Yeah. And then getting it like sat on in jiu-jitsu class while that second injury was recovering. So that led to about 8-9 years of like chronic pain. And from this whole thing, just from that session, and just because I know and I trust myself, for me, the motivational thing was not the issue. For me, it was the direction, because once I had the direction, but that's also just a part of my personality. Not everybody's like that. That's not going to work for everybody.
Yeah. I mean, everybody's got a different, hiccup, it's like, I think we've probably already seen this year's, first of the year, we've already seen it kind of decline.
Every time we go in there in January, my wife would go, none of these people are going to be here in March.
No, not
and
a
we're like, no,
chance.
they're not going to be here.
No, I went today. It was like, nice. I went in last night and, for some reason the weather, they like freaked out, and I opted to do a bit more like exercise, and I still had a shortened period of time, but I was like, I'm gonna go in and I get into the sauna, and I'm 10 minutes in, and the lady comes in, knocks on the door, like, hey, we're shutting down at 1 o'clock. And
it was President's Day.
No, it was because of the storm.
Not Monday. Monday was they shut down early. Yeah.
So I was like, shit. So anyways, I go first thing this morning, did a hardcore workout, and sat in the sauna. I was like, I like, everybody tells me I'm doing too much, but for me, it probably is too much. But it's such a mental battle to get through. Like, I did 55.
Do you mean too much in the sauna or too much working out?
Maybe a little bit of both.
Okay.
But
nice.
Definitely the sauna. So I look forward to the sauna more than anything else I do.
Oh my God.
And it is not relaxing. It's not even remotely, like for me, I did 55 minutes a day, but I did, 3 different sessions with a cold, not a cold plunge, but jump in the pool, get back in. But every moment of that sauna, other than like the first 2 minutes, which is like, oh, this is hot, this is good, it feels good. Outside of that is just a brutal mind fuck. And it's such a struggle for me to get through it, but it's like I have to like push myself. And like somebody the other day, I made a joke about it on my Instagram. I was like, this guy told me I was trying to make a joke, but the joke was clearly missed by so many people. Yeah, because I was like, this guy's a fucking asshole. I was like, sorry, it was a bad joke. Shouldn't have posted it. But you know, so many people are like, you know, you do the whatever. It's like I just have to kind of, and this is just me and how my mind works. Like I have to do it my way for a second and either fail. Yeah. And then maybe take a look, but like I have to do it my way. And I do research before I do it. Yeah. You know, so it's like I'm not just going into this blind, being like, I'm gonna sit in the sauna for 2 hours. Yeah. You know, there is research behind what I'm doing. But sense. For me, like that, you know, I think the Ignacio Rec Center is one of the only like areas that has an actual sauna. Yeah, the sports club
and the sports club, and that's it.
Yeah,
as far as I know, I looked at every other gym, and I was like, I'm not going if you don't have a sauna.
Yeah, it's weird. Like I'd never done. You know, you see like Joe Rogan and all these other like dudes online. They're like coming out of the sauna and they're constantly cold plunge, fucking, you know. It's like, but I'm like, I'm just gonna try it. Yeah. And it has huge recovery benefits. I don't know what it is, but like in years past, because I've cycled with weight, and right now I'm coming off of like probably my heaviest I've ever been. And you know, but before we moved back here from Texas, I was down to like 190, and I was like doing very, very well. Yeah. And then stress and me being a bitch like put all that weight back on. Totally. So, anyways, but like I had never done the sauna, and so I'm like, all right, let me just sit in this deal and like try and figure it out. And it's like in those past times where I would work out, you know, trying to get the weight loss thing going again, trying to get healthy again, it'd be like you do a leg day and it'd be like 3 or 4 days of just like my fucking quads are still hurting, my hammies are killing me, you know. But like there's something about the sauna and whatever that, you know, heat shock protein releasing.
Well, like there's it's the specific of the back and forth of the cold plunge. Yeah, that's happening with the recovery thing. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
it's awesome, man. We just did a 3 month, but this 3 month has been. I don't think we're up until like maybe end of March, but it's like it's been so good, and it's been more mental for me. Like I don't know. I think it's just like this is just how my awkward brain works. The other day I was so hell bent on something. That baggage, like it came right through the gym door. Right, and it was like, so I was trying to murder that baggage as hard as I could for an hour workout. I couldn't stop thinking about that fucking baggage. I was like, I just want to go in here and almost meditate while I'm going through like this insane kettlebell routine and running 5 miles. Like I just wanted to leave, and I couldn't get out of it. So I get into the sauna. And I'm like, I worked out for almost an hour. I'm like, okay, well, I've got more time. I'm just going to sit, go into the sauna, get through that first 2 minutes. And all of a sudden, I didn't realize it until I got back to the locker room an hour later. I didn't think about any of that. I thought about the horrible situation I had purposely put myself into, which is 185 degrees for, you know, and it was like,
wonderful.
I don't know what it does, man. And like, I've noticed you sitting there and kind of like more meditative. And I've tried that. When I first went there, I was trying to be like, okay, how can I get through this on my own? Without anything like auditorily or visually. Like, and I did that, and it was, it was like,
it's hard.
Fuck, man. I don't envy you, because I'm like, sometimes I'm sitting at that like 19th minute, dude, and I'm just shaking, and I know the people next to me are like, this guy is annoying as fuck. But so I slowly started bringing in headphones. Nice. And then now, like, I've got to, I just have to get in the groove, which I mean, I was air drumming the other day.
Yeah. But that's the thing is you get in that headspace, and it's like, it's so cool to have the moment where you realize that was the catalyst for the headspace that actually was that's what helps you. Like, that's the actual part that helps you, is having those realizations, you know, and to know that like, oh, this is how I use this as this tool. And then it's like, well, what else can I, you know, it's kind of like realizing you got an impact gun in your hand and a whole set of, you know, security bits. Yeah. You're like, well, what else can I open with this thing?
For sure. It's been good, man.
That's awesome, dude.
This go around with getting back like healthy. And I did a bullshit one-off episode the other day, but you know, I really do, like, for me, like, cause I've like I said, I've fluctuated with weight, fluctuated with health. Yeah. Most of the time it's job driven, and I just get so hyper focused on the job that everything else takes a backseat. But like, it's always been like in the past, it's always been like, okay, I want to get back down to a weight. I want to get, but this time it's so different.
Right.
Because this last like 2 years coming out of COVID. And then also just like realizing that, I put myself like with I'm a damn good real estate agent. I've done exceptional my first 2 years in this business. That's just kind of the way that I work.
Right.
And I hyper focus on things. But that job affords you the ability to say yes or no at any time. Now there's a monetary impact plus or minus, but if you want to go do something with your kids or you want to go do something with your wife, you can say yes.
It's a great,
to those
good place
things.
to be. Yeah. No,
but
it's a really
at the
good
same
place to
time,
be.
the way my brain works is I might say yeah, and then I come back and I work triple as hard. And
totally.
I felt
you feel
that.
like you have a deficit to make up.
I feel like that kind of put me in this weird mental space where I just kind of stopped caring about myself. I felt happy because of the first time ever, even having owned my own companies before, I felt free for like a second.
Right. That's
but then like looking at it, like I signed up for this marathon that I ran in 2019. And the marathon sucks. It's fucking brutal.
Yeah.
It's the Bataan Memorial Death March.
Okay.
It's at White Sands Missile Range down in Las Cruces, Mexico.
Oh, jeez.
It's a really, really shitty race, and legitimately, it is a qualifier for the Boston Marathon. But legitimately, a lot of people get carted off because it's a very hard struggle of a race.
Right.
So
Sounds like it.
I ran it last time. I wasn't in that great of shape. I was okay. I was like in my fluctuating, probably. Like it halfway between being like not fit and like fit, somewhere in the middle.
Right.
I hadn't been running enough, and I got through the race. I did okay for my class. I did hurt myself a little bit after. It kind of took me some recovery time. So this time I was like, I need something that if I don't do this, I will know that if I need something that I had to have it in front of me that if I didn't get myself healthy, I was going to hurt myself. Like legitimately hurt myself and potentially have to be carted off of a race.
Yeah.
And because I've run it before, I know exactly what it looks like. I know the hell that you have to put yourself through both physically and mentally for that race. And so I was just like, this is it. But in this last 2.5, 3 months of kind of like getting back into that headspace of like taking care of numero uno first.
Yeah.
Like, so you can be here for the people that you love and care
100%.
about. There's been this weird, like, almost like outer body journey with like, it stopped becoming about like getting to 180 pounds or being fit or carrying. It was like, dude, you know, you're doing the work, you're doing a shit ton of it, and that work will pay dividends. It doesn't matter what the work looks like right now in the mirror or what it says on a scale or the fact that the pants you still love don't quite fucking fit. That's all the peripheral bullshit. The motto has to be like, you're doing this because you either love it or hate it, and out of that will come all of the positivity. Yeah, dude. You know, and like that, I told that guy the other day, like jokingly, he's like, "Oh, you shouldn't sit." And I'm like, "Dude, I need this." Yeah. Like it might not work for you, but I need this. Yeah. I'm gonna go jump in that cold ass pool or take that cold ass shower right after I'm out of here, and I know that the endorphins are gonna rush, and I'm gonna feel better than I've ever felt.
Absolutely.
But in years past, I never would have done it like that. I never would have been. I would have been the dude, the yoked fucking
right. Yeah,
look at my muscles. I don't. That doesn't matter. It's all about like
that's beautiful.
The way that it makes you feel. And because I don't want to not feel that anymore.
Yeah,
that's the weird thing.
Yeah.
You know, even though it sucks, I know it's gonna suck.
I'm like that with the cold thing now, where I'm like, I feel weird if I'm like comfortable in the shower. where you're like, where it's like, no, like I really like, I love a hot shower and I love like to make it like burn and like itches, like scratches an itch on my back, and I love that. But then like when I'm actually doing the sauna and doing the cold and hot plunge, when I go and I shower off at the end of the workout, I can't put a hot shower on.
No.
I'm just in like lukewarm water, and it feels weird if I'm like in a hot shower right after that.
Yeah.
It's funny how it changes you, but then like that stuff happens, and like those weird observations turn into these things that like you can use in like life.
Yeah.
And like that's been the cool, surprising part about like just focusing on that, the surprising part of focusing on that, and then realizing how universal all these weird little sort of personal how these weird little personal experiences and that we think and feel every day that we think are so kind of meaningless, that it's really about your application and you're willing to understand what you can do with that.
Yeah. And not forgetting.
Right. And not forgetting. That's a hard part.
I struggle
that's a hard
with
thing.
that is like you've been through this a million times.
Yeah. There's this thing in Taoism, and it's called naming your dragons. So because if you give the dragon a name, then it's easier to recognize next time you see it.
I like that.
Yeah. And that was something my business partner Matt, my friend from back in New York, he clued me onto that in a dark moment, long time ago, and it's served me very well. And every time I find someone, I try to that I can lay it on, I will.
That's a good one.
Because it's that kind of Jungian, and it is very Jungian too. That the whole like you will continue to repeat and experience a cycle until you break it, because part of that is like you have to realize it's not happening to you, it's happening with you and through you, and that's what it's like you need to direct these energies, and that it's not, you can't put a will on chaos, that's what creates more chaos and more struggle and more suffering and conflict, and that if you just I had a point there, but I kind of was rambling. Sorry.
I was thinking about that. Still naming your dragons, man. Calling them out. I mean, that puts such a...
Well, yeah, that's what it was.
That turns it into truth.
The dragons. Exactly. Yeah.
It's like it. Then all of a sudden, it's like you've seen it, you visualized it, you know exactly. You're calling it out, but it's like the moment that you make it real by associating it with a name.
Yes.
Then it's present forever.
It's present as that thing forever, and it becomes it can't disguise itself.
Yeah.
Or if it does, it's easier for you to see through it.
I fucking love that.
Because even after I learned that, it was like, that was before I moved to LA.
Yeah.
Right. So it was like, literally went through the same cycle 3 times within 5 years. Right. Like went through the New York crisis cycle, moved to LA, went through the LA crisis cycle, moved back to New York, had the same crisis cycle again, moved to Durango and had the exact same crisis cycle.
Yeah.
Right.
But in a weird way, it's like, it took you, unfortunately, those 4 cycles to be like, fuck, okay.
To be like, oh, it is me. Yeah. To be like, oh, wait, the first time I thought it was this because I didn't know. The second time I thought it was this because maybe I didn't want to admit my place in it. The third time I'm mature enough to start looking at the fact that actually it is me. And if I want this bar to succeed, then I have to do something about that. And then the 4th time it was like, I'm sitting there in the machine shop going, oh, I know what this is. I was like, I recognize that guy.
There's
is that
dragon.
Bob's coming around again, And that was what finally broke it. I mean, but it's just like, if I'd never had that nugget to begin with, I don't know if I would have. I mean, you can speculate where I'd be. I can speculate on where I'd be, but it's like, what's the point?
Sure.
I'd rather just revel in the attitude of gratitude and the space of grace I'm floating in, focus on that instead.
Oh man. Oh, that's awesome, dude. I love that. Name your dragon.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's got a lot of weight to it.
Name your dragons. Yeah. It's a beautiful thing. Yeah. He's a heady dude, man. My buddy Matt. He's a real heady guy.
Yeah. You think he'll ever come out and visit?
If I'm trying, it's hard because he grew up in Montana, so he knows all this.
Oh yeah,
he's like, and it's he goes back and sees his family and stuff and all that. But I'm trying to get him out here. It's also just crazy because he actually just opened up his own bar.
Oh wow,
on his own, which is amazing to see his own growth. To see these 2 guys where it's like we're just 2 guys didn't know nothing about getting a liquor license. And now here we are 5 years later, and the dude's 3 months into his second bar, and he's the sole guy in it. He's got a invisible partner that's helping out with the money and stuff, and it's the same guy that we had as our invisible partner at our first bar, and it's awesome. I couldn't be happier for him. And he was the one that really like cracked my head open with all this stuff back in the day of like just looking at life from a point that it actually has no obligation to make sense to you, rather than trying to expect that you're going to be the one who makes all the sense of it. And that's what makes you a great person, and that it's actually the truly great people are the ones that can ride the waves of chaos with the most style. Like that's kind of what he taught me, and ever since I learned that, it's just been chasing that.
Yeah.
That it's like, I just want to ride the wave with more style, with all the style I can throw at it.
That's a good one, man. That's a good one. Eric, dude, thank you so much for coming on, brother.
I've had a lot of
appreciate
fun. Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, man.
I really appreciate you having me on this. Just, we met so quickly and, I was like, well, sure, why not?
Yeah.
If he's interested, if he thinks I'm interesting enough, then I'm gonna go find out if I
I'm
actually
just interested to talk to people, man. It's like that's
what
the whole thing is.
What else are you really gonna do? At the end of the day, it's like, why else are we here but for creating, more experiences like this?
Getting to know people, like it's so strange. Like this is I think it's either the 25th or maybe the 27th episode recorded, and
awesome.
Like you think about that, they're all hour and a half. Some of them even longer, but I mean, even like some of my deepest, most dear friends, you talk to them for a hour and a half, and it's like. You have those conversations, like you've had that many conversations in the past, but it's like when you're in this, and it's not, this is an interview. This is mainly most of the time just shooting the shit, but like there's something about the conversation in this manner, like in this framework that like, and especially like if somebody's willing to allow themselves to be a little bit more vulnerable than they had in the past, maybe even with you. And like, I mean, I learned things I had, my best friend in the whole fucking world on. And there's like little nuances, like, he still lives in Denver or he's in Denver, I'm here. And like, you start to realize like, man, you miss parts of each other's lives and like, oh my God, like this is happening. Yeah. And it's a really strange way. And like, that's my whole thing is like, there's really nothing to be gained from this. I mean, so many people do the podcast thing or whatever, like, but I like, there's definitely a selfish manner about this. Like it is, for me, it's like it's a good healing mechanism.
Right. I was going to say it's selfish in a good way. It's one of the things that's selfish in a good way, because when you hold, like what you're talking about, like you learn something about your friends because you were able to create and then hold a space that allowed them to expand. And we, and even in that, it's like through doing this podcast thing, like you can learn that and you can realize like now you can use that to help people in other situations where like if someone's going through something or whatever, you're like, well, I know now that I can create and hold a space for a vulnerable person and I can help and I can actually start to help them in that space, or they can I can leave them space to help themselves. And every time you have an experience like this and you're trying to hold a space where you can allow that, it's like you're just, you're setting up, it's kind of like, you're setting up for the inevitable growth to happen. Sure. Which is actually a really cool thing. So I would argue like that's why it's selfish in a good way, that it's like you're not doing this because you're chasing a success. Yeah. Right? Like that's why my photography career failed, because I wanted to be the guy. I wanted to have a $3 million apartment and date models and drive fancy cars. And that was the only reason when I was honest and I dug deep down, that was the only reason I really wanted to be in fashion like that. And then once that whole illusion was shattered, like it kind of, it broke completely. I was like, I identified with it. Yeah. And so if you can have this and create this space and allow this, and we can do this for each other, and it's about that, and then it's like, that's cool that we're recording it, and if other people can see it and they can use it, because you never know what you say or what you do is going to impact, how that's going to impact other people. Oh, yeah. And so just creating a space where you're going to allow a moment of growth through vulnerability from someone that can then be shared, if that's like, there's a lot worse selfish things out there you can be doing. It's one thing to be sitting here and it's like, oh, if it's, there's sponsors on the wall and you're, name dropping all these things. And it's like, I gotta, an Instagram and check out my Instagram, and this, that, it's like, that's different. Like people are going to see right through that. That's not, authentic. And there's a lot of people out there. We do
put it out on social media.
Well, no, that's what I mean. Like you're not, it's obvious you're doing this because you like talking to people. Yeah. You're not doing this because you saw something and were like, well, I want to be like that because I can make money doing that. And that looks like a cool lifestyle. Like that's what I mean when I say social media. Like there's a lot of that with the influencer thing of like, a lot of people are making money selling lies. Yeah. Yeah. And people are starting to see through that. And I think there needs to be more of this. Sure. Like I would so much rather see 500 podcasts where people sit around and share genuine moments with each other than, 500 new cool shirts that I gotta buy, want to buy or want to make or get other people to buy or whatever, because, so what? It's like both of them are like kind of so what? Like my dad will always say, in the big picture, in the long run, everybody's dead, So it's like in the meantime, and I'm here and I don't know what any of this is. So just soak it up and have a good time and, ride back to just riding the wave with as much style as possible. And, why, it's like, cause there's some people out there who are like, I don't even want to ride the wave. They're like, why would you even ride a wave?
Yeah.
They're like, I got to tame that wave has got to, calm down and use, and I can't do anything unless that wave is even calm in the first place. And you're kind of like, well, it's a wave, bro. Yeah.
Those are the most interesting type of people. Like I've had a couple of folks on here that are very, let's just call it, left brain. And like, I don't know what side of my brain is, but
right.
I can be very like strict in my own mind. But at times like I love it because like what I've seen just from like kind of doing a couple episodes, like most people, including myself, there's a little bit of anxiety, like that just kind of inevitably happens as we sit down and click play, right? They're like, oh God, red light panic. But you have this like conversation, it's like 20 to 25 minutes. You kind of like, the breath starts to clear. And then what I love about that is like, it's like almost, you're not breaking that person, but you're like out of nowhere,
right?
They're starting to like show you a side that maybe they don't show anybody.
Right.
Because then
it
just, I've had people be like, I forgot the cameras were on.
Yeah.
Like, well, I didn't.
Yeah.
But I'm so glad that you did because they act really vulnerable. And then oddly enough, and I think it's just the natural brain's response to somebody being vulnerable. If you're not just a rude asshole,
well, of course,
you openly become more vulnerable back to them. And it's like, it is this like therapeutic session between two people. If you allow yourself to be vulnerable and somebody's vulnerable back and like you have this like emotion like with each other, it's a weird, song and dance, and the people that do it, the best in the world that do this podcast thing, like, I'm a connoisseur. I listen, the ones that do it, I've caught a couple of episodes here lately where I was just mesmerized at the way, the fucking dance of the conversation. And it was almost like
cool.
Listen to it, not watch it. Watching it's always fine, but like listening to it, the ebbs and flows. It was so not choreographed, but more beautiful than any choreographed dance. It was amazing.
It's like a
and when I heard that, I was like, that's what I want out of this.
Yeah,
absolutely. It doesn't has nothing to do with money. The odds are completely against us. This would never make money. So if I made it about that, that would be an absolute failure from day one.
Yeah.
But I heard that episode and I was like, that's what I want to get good enough at being vulnerable to the people and then the person here that somebody can get the opportunity, maybe if I get good enough, that they can experience that dance that I heard the other day. Because I literally pulled the truck over and I was like, I'm going to just listen to the rest 30 because I've got to go to this meeting. Fuck that meeting. I'm going to be 30 minutes late because this is beautiful. And it's just a conversation.
It's awesome.
Yeah.
It's like music. It's like jazz. And and that's what I love about it. And like, what's ironic is everything you just said is like what's just motivated me for getting back into music and picking up, instruments I haven't picked up since I was 19 years old. And just for that. Just for creating those moments is to literally like, I don't learn songs. I don't obsess over tabs. I don't learn licks. I learn music theory and I put songs on and I do that. And I'm just there to create a moment of improvisation, for that moment, just to see what will happen, just to have that experience. And I think that's one of the coolest parts of just about existence is that we have that opportunity and it's our choice to do it's our choice to choose whether or not we want to do that. And I just think that's such a cool thing.
Oh yeah.
And what you do is what's great is like holding space like that. And the vulnerability thing is it's like when you create a space, you allow the people to feel comfortable enough to make that choice, to make that choice to be vulnerable or to be that way. And a lot of people, I think, I don't say a lot of people, like I want to totally generalize, but at the same time, it's like everyone has struggle and trauma and response and reaction based on their empirical experiences. And if you can put them in a place where they don't have to rely on those, you actually get to see the real person behind them.
Yeah.
And that's so important to let them be that person too. you know,
Well, that's what I'm so in. That is the intriguing side of this. Like I would say the more clinical side of my brain, right? In this conversation is like, I've talked to so many people that are so fearful of, yes, the cameras and recording is one thing, but like they're fearful of, I almost want to equate it sometimes of like, a lot of people have that imposter syndrome. They don't think that they have a story. They don't think that they have any importance. Like they're good at their job, and maybe their job defines them, but they don't believe at their core that it's worth telling anybody. And I completely disagree because you know, I know so many people, and you may only know like a sliver of their story. But it's like I know I can say with absolute conviction, if we can have a conversation. And it may take an hour, it may take 2 hours. I promise you, there is a fucking thesis of who you are. And somebody can relate to it. You know? And 100%. So it's like, that's cool. That's the biggest clinical side of this that I want to get out of people is like, I do want to genuinely hear your story because I believe that everybody has something to say. And it doesn't have to be like, you know, saying something on Instagram, a fucking rude comment. That's what's but saying it's so because I think everybody has
have to say stuff like that.
Yes. Oh man. So that's the other reason why cool. I truly love this is just and there's definitely the guests where I'm excited like, oh man, this is going to be so fun and they have they go, you know, this way or that way. But I love when those people come on and I can tell from the initial email or the text message is like they're nervous. They would love to do it, but they're nervous. And then I get to go, like I had some guests on a while ago. We were in here for 45 minutes just in this setting. I didn't even click record. Right. I was just talking to them. And like we start to get through it. And I was like, and they're like, what? I was like, there it is. We just did it.
Yeah.
And they were like, okay. Yeah. And I'm like, all right, let's go. I hit record. Yeah. They got anxious again because red light panic. Then we got through it and then we stopped it. And then we talked for another 30 minutes after.
Nice.
And I was like, okay, so do you guys feel how empowering that felt to you and to your program and the weight that's been lifted off your shoulders? Because you're walking through this life doing really good, but you at every turn, you feel like you're failing. You know, I was just like, you feel that empowerment? And they were like, yeah, like it felt really, really good. And I was like, good, because the people that listen to that could also potentially feel really, really good from hearing your stuff, you know, like your struggles and your failures. And, you know, maybe they reach out to you and these guys run a really, really, really great program. But I know that almost 2 hours we spent in here with only an hour captured, they walked out of here with a little bit of pep in their step being like, I feel fucking good.
They're like, I did that.
Yeah.
They're like, for them, it was an accomplishment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it had an impact outside of the thing because 3 people called and were able to go through their program. And she like called me like,
that's super cool.
I can't thank you enough. Like, I don't have a big platform.
Yeah.
But it was like, that doesn't matter. Yeah. Somebody on Instagram said this and it passed over to here.
Yeah.
And then those 3 people were able to get like help. And it was like, fuck yeah. All right. There we go.
That's so funny that you would say that because I was actually just talking with my wife this afternoon. We were talking about our earliest stages of our careers when we first got to New York City. Total greenhorn went behind the ears. And I was meeting with the only photographer to give me a chance. And he was this guy he was big. He was really big, shot, you know, ad campaigns and things, but he wasn't he's not like a household name. And it was kind of like he, you know, didn't see himself as anybody or anything. And I emailed him from Ohio and I got a hold of tracked down his agent, you know, and emailed him from Ohio and was like, I love your work. I've been I was obsessed. Like he was the guy I modeled all my aesthetic after for, you know, the 2 years of art school I had left when I found out his work existed. And there I was, and I'm in New York City and it's my first job and I'm working with the guy and we wrap for the day and I'm just chilling back and we're sitting around bullshitting. And I'm like, I just can't believe I'm here, like with you. Like this guy, like he's like, I was like, your editorials that you shot like changed my entire aesthetic direction, and you're the whole reason I'm like here right now. And he's like, that's so crazy. He's like, because I'm just some guy who's just some photographer awash in thousands of other photographers in this city, and I never really realized what I can do would have an impact on someone outside of me. And it was just such a crazy moment that he was realizing that at the same time as I was, that it's like, cause here I was just this nobody from Ohio and he thought he was in, the craziest photo market in the world. And he's a nobody in that market. And from his perspective, he's struggling every day, but I'm looking at like, this guy's my hero. He's got an agent. He's in the city, he's shooting ad campaigns. The work is so unique from what anybody else is doing. And he just like had this thing like, oh yeah, I guess what I do actually can impact people. It's like, whether you like it or not.
Yeah. Whether you like it or not.
Whether you like it or not.
You got to take the good and the bad.
Yeah.
Oh man.
Yeah.
Well, man, dude, I really appreciate it.
This has been a lot of fun.
This has been. We got to do it again sometime.
Absolutely. Yeah, we didn't even get into making music.
No.
So.
No. But that's just leaves room to breathe for the next episode. Man. And,
absolutely.
I definitely want to hang out with you guys,
Cool.
Get to know each other. And
we're around. So.
Well, thank you, brother.
Yeah, absolutely.
Appreciate you.
Appreciate you, man.
All right.
Have you ever felt?
Are you listening? Damn. Yeah.